Hey folks, greetings from the Offensive Security Group here at Secure IT 360, coming at you with a new episode of the Cyber Threat Perspective. Today we have two special guests on the show today. We've got Joey Vandergrift, who is VP of Security Operations here at Secure IT 360, as well as Mark Brophy, who heads up our digital forensic incident response practice here at Secure IT 360. So in this episode, we're going to be talking about the CrowdStrike outage, the global CrowdStrike outage that happened just last week, or if you're listening to this maybe 2 weeks ago, depending on when you're listening to this. But we're going to talk about the event, talk about what happened, kind of a series of events real quick so we can get on the same page, and just kind of our reactions to it. I know, Joey, you responded to this very late at night. Was it Friday? Yep. So there's a lot to unpack here, and this is going to be kind of our thoughts and our perspective on what happened, the impact, the remediations, and kind of going forward, what IT people, what CIOs, CISOs, sysadmins should be thinking about, what we think is, a result of this. So first, before I get started, I feel like, am I echoing to you guys?
No, it's not good.
All right, it might just be me. Okay. I hear like a slight echo on my side, but that's okay.
I guess I just briefly heard it.
Yeah. It's all good. Okay, so real quick, July 19th, 2024, 4:09 UTC. So that was 12:09 a.m. Eastern. It'd be 11 p.m. Central for you, Joey. That's about midnight for me and Mark here in New York. So CrowdStrike released a sensor configuration update, what they call a channel file to Windows systems. These channel files have like behavioral protection mechanisms built into them. They're used by the Falcon sensor, and this is something that's common at CrowdStrike and many other EDR vendors, right? They release behavioral updates or signatures or things like that on a regular basis to cover, TTPs, threat actor TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. So this is not new. And something that was kind of misheard or misrepresented in the news early on was that this was a kernel driver, when in fact it wasn't. So this was a content update. So that was kind of the first thing that was interesting going around, is we weren't sure if this was a kernel driver, if this was the sensor, or what this kind of was initially.
So
yeah, go ahead.
So this actually, the confusion around that is the fact that the CrowdStrike Falcon is a kernel level. It uses the kernel level access like a driver. You can consider it a driver because of what it needs to see within the systems and within the Windows Windows infrastructure. There's only so many ways you can get at that. For a great deeper dive on that, I caught a video series from Dave Plummer. He's got a YouTube channel called Dave's Garage. He's a retired developer from Microsoft. He worked on Windows going back to 9X and NT 3.1. He tells you what he describes this. For those of us who were in IT 15 years ago, when you put a bad printer driver on and blue screen, exact same thing happens. Something happened with the driver. Since Microsoft has pushed things out of the kernel level for just such a reason, for stability, CrowdStrike's been still allowed access, and there's reasons why. But CrowdStrike did not update their main piece that talked to the kernel. They updated a piece inside. So that's where Microsoft is feeling like they were blindsided, because they tested stuff to give it the certification labs they go through. Anything that talks about the kernel has to be certified. And that's where CrowdStrike pushed in a routine update that they said, well, this doesn't really affect the driver, but what happened is the driver threw a null value, which then caused the blue screen. So they're both kind of half right, like they're all like doing the Spider-Man, hey, you should have.
Yep.
And that's what happens. That's where the confusion is that actually a lot of EDR products do need to sit at the kernel. Mm-hmm. And Dave's channel talks a little deeper as far as why do we still have this, and why is it still a problem, and why can't Microsoft close this off?
Yep. Yeah, and what's interesting is that from an EDR and kind of an offensive security perspective, a threat actor perspective, that kernel access is quite powerful, right, for detecting a lot of these new techniques, or these novel techniques, as CrowdStrike will call them in their content updates. And I can tell you from a pen testing and offensive security perspective, there's a lot of things that you can abuse from a threat actor perspective if that product is not running in kernel space or in the kernel in ring 0, right? So if it's just user mode, there's a lot of ways to kind of circumvent things. So there's good reason for that, right? There is good reason for kernel access. So this channel file 291, they called it, it had to do with named pipes. And CrowdStrike recently, just conveniently a day or two before, just released an update to the CrowdStrike C2 framework. So the command and control framework that is very popular amongst pen testers and offensive security people, red teamers, but also threat actors. So CrowdStrike, the names are similar, right? I'll probably mistake that a couple times this podcast, but CrowdStrike is very popular. It's probably the most popular C2 framework out right now, and especially among threat actors. So when this came out, it seems like this named pipe TTP that they were kind of trying to patch or get a detection for, some telemetry for, is ultimately kind of what brought this down. And so this content update, this channel file, had to do with named pipes and how they're used in the Windows operating system. So this content update was around that. So around 409 UTC, they had deployed this content update. Now, I just want to make a slight diversion from like what these content updates are, because in CrowdStrike's notification or their blog post, their preliminary like information here, they distinguish between regular content updates and what they call rapid response. So there's these regular content updates that they're sending out all the time, and they do their thing. But then there's these rapid response content updates, which presumably are quick responses to new TTPs that they're seeing in the wild, right? So this issue happened as a result of a rapid response content update, and there was a bug in this content validator, and ultimately the thing that parses it right on the sensor, which is running kernel, couldn't really figure it out. There was a logic bug. And then that's when the blue screen, the system crash happened. So this was a rapid response content update, and it relied on this content validator and some of these like complex things that they're probably still kind of analyzing. But that was kind of the end result there of that system crash.
Well, and I think it's important to note that, we all know in cybersecurity, it's a cat and mouse game, right? So, what CrowdStrike was trying to do here was do the right thing and, try to get ahead of potentially, trying to detect this new named pipe technique.
Yep.
And so, every EDR software out there does the same thing. There's rapid content updates that hit daily, across all these different software packages. So, it really could have happened to anyone, right? I've seen over the last, I think if you go back to like maybe a year and a half ago, there was a time where Defender for Endpoint released a bad content update, and it was actually causing DFE to flag legitimate processes. Yep. And that caused a lot of issues. We thought that there was a security incident going on when it happened. I remember it was a Friday. So, CrowdStrike's not the only one. It's just this one happened to blow up.
And compound things in CrowdStrike, March this year, they released a bad update for their Linux sensor that caused some issues. So they are just now coming out of the, that didn't have the name worthiness because of obviously the utilization of Linux servers. It's not the same volumes compared to endpoints, right? There's a lot more endpoints in the world. They're usually interfacing with Windows, and there are Linux or even backend on the Linux. So that was newsworthy in the cyber realm, but didn't make CNN headlines. But so CrowdStrike kind of already had a chipped tooth this year, like, oh, hey, you guys shouldn't be doing that. And then this came right after it. Because I think even in April, there was another release for a different distro of Linux that caused an issue. So this rapid fire, like 3 and 4 months, that's where people are really kind of, besides the impact of the sheer scope of this one, the rapid fire CrowdStrike's dealing with there's something rotten. You should not release 3 bad updates on 3 different platforms within 4 months.
And I will tell you, CrowdStrike is one of the best, if not the best, EDR right now from my perspective, from a pen testing perspective, from the speed at which there are detections and telemetry for TTPs. the speed at which their threat hunting team, like their internal SOC, responds, their threat intel team. It's really difficult to match what they have going on over there, and they're really good. They're top tier. They're one of the best in my opinion. And it's funny because many times, I'll be getting ready for an engagement, right? The week prior, right? I'll be developing stuff. I'll be working on bypasses, or I'll be working on, techniques to use that, I'll slightly obfuscate my tools or whatever the case may be. And I'll have everything ready on a Friday, right? I'll get everything all ready that week. And then come Monday, everything's getting detected. It's like all the stuff that I found that I was researching, that I'm testing, and it's working in the lab. Now all of a sudden it's getting detected come the next week. So it does work that fast, and it can work that fast. Yeah. And it's kind of a double-edged sword.
Yeah, and CrowdStrike, because of security product, I guess they have the double the scrutiny. Over the last several years, we can name every major vendor from Apple to even their iPhones, Android, Google. Everyone's released something bad. Something happened. You're like, how did this get through? The fact that, one, the sheer scale, but two, I mean, the track record of CrowdStrike for what that does is actually pretty impressive. The fact that this is, I'm contradicting myself. The last 3 months, they just had 3 in a row. But if you look back, maybe the last 8-9 years or since there's such a company, you were hard pressed to find any kind of update that was disruptive, at least, or any update that they pulled. And so they do a really good track record. And the reality is, especially before I joined Secure IT360, I was in an environment where we were a CrowdStrike customer, 3,000 to 4,000 endpoints. I used the product for 5 years intensely. I'm triple certified. I've got my wings from CrowdStrike. If I was a security manager and management came to me and said, we need to pull CrowdStrike out, they'd have a revolt. Like, no, this absolutely is not happening. You're not taking CrowdStrike away from me because of just how powerful a tool it is.
Yep.
It saved me Log4j, saved me time and time again of end user running something that they thought was safe, and CrowdStrike stepped on it. Overwatch was phenomenal. Yep. So it is still a very good product. What we're seeing is they're so good, they're adopted by everybody. And when everybody has market leader, that ends up being a combination to set up the global size of the amount of devices that fail, right? Yep. It's not, CrowdStrike's fault that everyone, bought their product and put it on the Windows endpoints, right? So that's why it's so impactful, is that you have 2 market leaders that conflict with each other and cause a problem. And that's why we had 8 million devices impacted, right?
Yep. Yeah, and so that's a great point. And for sure, I think Microsoft said there was like 8 million endpoints or something impacted, which is, who knows how they get that number, and maybe it's conservative or not, but incredible amount of market share nonetheless. I did want to get your perspective, Joey, on that evening, right? Midnight. What were you doing still awake? How'd you get the call? Like, what happened? What was kind of some of the scuttlebutt going on?
Yeah, I mean, I was asleep. I think I've been asleep for about an hour, but I was on call, and I usually am on call on Thursdays. And so anyway, we had a client that called into the SOC. I think this was around 12:30 a.m. Central Standard Time for us. And so client calls into the SOC, they reporting that they had a lot of endpoints that had blue screen of death, error messages.
Yep.
And sometimes, obviously, that's going to cause panic if you've got a lot of your devices doing that. That yep. can be a symptom of ransomware.
Yep. And so, by the way, real quick, back, if anybody's familiar with MSO8 067, that also could cause blue screens. Yep. When I was playing with that back in the day, in a lab, like, it would blue screen most often. Right.
Yeah.
Like you would get code execution as a result, but in some cases, but many times at blue screen. So.
Yep. But so we had a client that, called in, they were concerned. So they had spun up a conference bridge and they wanted us to jump on. So one of the analysts that was on shift and myself, we quickly, jumped up, I jumped up and, got into this meeting and, didn't really know what was going on in the beginning. So, we hadn't seen any alerts on our side. So, we didn't see anything that would lead to this kind of activity, which is rare. Usually we detect something, hopefully. And so as we started looking into it further and their team started looking into it further, there was mention that in the blue screen error messages that it referenced that csagent.sys file, which is related to the CrowdStrike Falcon sensor. And so once we knew that, and that was a common denominator across all of the blue screen error messages, I logged into our CrowdStrike community portal. And pretty quickly, I mean, they had a bulletin advisory already up saying that, you know, they knew that there was reports of this issue going on. So that was good. They didn't have any remediation instructions at that point yet. And so I basically just started looking through the community portal, you know, hoping that people would be talking about it in a message board thread. And I did find a thread that was pretty active. You know, obviously other people were seeing this now. And so everybody was trying to figure out how to fix it. And so I remember, you know, seeing the first thing that popped up that somebody had posted as a potential remediation was to boot into safe mode and rename the CrowdStrike directory. And while I was looking this up, our SOC analyst, his laptop blue screen, because we run CrowdStrike internally as well. So, you know, he dropped off, he had been impacted. But basically I kept researching, you know, I passed that information on to the client. And so we felt pretty good that we knew this wasn't a security incident. So I jumped off, you know, they kind of knew what they needed to do. They were going to start trying that recommendation that I gave them. And so then I turned my focus to, you know, trying to remediate it internally. So, you know, I got with the analyst, I called him, you know, he had dropped off, and told him what we needed to do. And so we were able to follow those instructions, reboot into safe mode, rename that folder, and then we got him back up. And then from there, you know, we just kept an eye on it. You know, once, I want to say within another 30 minutes, CrowdStrike had identified the issue. They had reverted the file. So, you know, they were no longer pushing that bad content file. And so my machine never got impacted. You know, I mean, this thing was kind of luck of the draw, right? I mean, I think that was one good thing about this, is that it happened in the middle of the night. You know, if it had happened during business hours, it probably would have been even, I mean, it was a big impact already, but it probably would have been 10 times as bad as it was during the day, because a lot of computers, if they were asleep, they weren't connected or whatever, like they didn't get impacted, which was a good thing. So, but once we went through that, you know, we had a couple of domain controllers internally that were impacted. So we worked on remediating those. And then once we felt like we were good internally, we started working on, you know, an email that we sent out to our clients, anybody that we had that was using CrowdStrike. We tried to give them a heads up as to what was going on.
Yep.
So I think I went back to bed around 3 a.m., 3:30, and then woke back up the next morning, and we started calling our clients, you know, just checking on everybody. And we spent that day just trying to help people remediate and get back to a good spot.
Yep. Yeah. And Mark, this remediation was extra difficult in some cases because of BitLocker. And the need to, like, when you reboot in safe mode, if it's BitLocked, you're going to have to enter that BitLocker key, which you can't do remotely, right? So there's a lot of sneaker netting, and for highly distributed organizations, geographically, right, that is extremely difficult, right, from a support perspective.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of after actions on this and reviews. You know, you say tongue in cheek, you know, 99.99 is not 100%. Mm-hmm. And when I'm a former IT executive, ran IT departments, so I know you're saying, oh, someone's promising 5.9 uptime, that must be good. It's good until it's not. Until that 1 in 1,000, 1 in a million hits. And when we had the combination, as I mentioned before, the large customer base of Microsoft, large customer base of CrowdStrike, combining the two, now all of a sudden you don't plan for that, but I think you're going to see a lot of people have after action reviews say we need to have things in place in case something else happens. You know, some IT departments have been dealing with BitLocker, managing that key for years, where sometimes TPM chips just flake out, and so a user wakes up in the morning, turns on their laptop, and they're hit with the BitLocker key, and they call help desk, and they walk them through how to type it in and restore that. So there are some things in place, but the whole sneaker netting, getting people in the safe mode, or if you had, I can only imagine people had remote data centers, you know, where you set up DR because you have your DR site in the middle of nowhere, and all of a sudden you got to send someone out there, you know, to, you know, push the friggin' button to get things going. So I think there'll be a lot of postmortems. There'll be a lot of review of this to find out, you know, what can you better. And, you know, I think I think distance outsourcing may take a hit on this because, there are some things we just demonstrated. You need to have hands-on keyboards, or at least you need to have a partner who's got a legion of smart hands. Maybe the people who show up in the field aren't Microsoft certified experts, but they're A+ certified, know how to boot into safe mode, right?
Yep.
And army of those guys, right? You may find, that there's gaps in your response teams that maybe you don't always need, CrowdStrike certified responder. Maybe you do need just an A+ technician and, with a Toyota, right?
Yep. Yeah, and I saw a lot of stories about office managers and front desk staff and administrative folks who are not IT, right? They don't go into configuration menus and do administrative functions. I saw a lot of stories on the internet the past few days of people like that who are entering in BitLocker keys, right? Because IT or the MSP has sent directions, and just for getting people up to speed as quickly as possible, they were entering in their own BitLocker keys. So question for you guys is, after this kind of all, after everybody comes down from this, right, from a support perspective, should we be rotating these BitLocker keys now that these BitLocker keys are kind of floating through Teams, they're going through email, they're going through text message, they're going through all these different channels? Does it make sense to rotate these BitLocker keys? Because that's something I thought of as like, well, all these BitLocker keys are floating all over the internet. I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to start seeing these on the internet somewhere in these logs or leaks. And obviously you need the physical disk, right? Like you need the hard drive or the machine to capitalize on that. But is that a risk? Is that something that that IT shop should be kind of considering?
I'm not sure I would put that into a concern bucket. When you say the phrase keys are in emails and emails can get breached, but the BitLocker key is massive. I forget the number of characters it is and how unique it is, and usually it's not identifiable by the GUID or the workstation ID that's assigned to. So you would have to magically grab Mark Brophy's laptop and then grab the email that might be floating with that long key, and then take the offline disk, boot, enter the key to decrypt. Like there's a lot of, there needs to be lightning strikes to happen, for you to be able to get that asset. Now, if you're a high risk environment where you're under constant threat, where you do have people trying to walk past security turnstiles and, dash and grab, dumpster dive. All right, maybe that might be something to roll out a plan, but I would not put that under like a code red follow up. It might be something just as your time allows, maybe not a bad idea, but right now the poor IT guys in the field, they're just now getting things back up and running, and still some aren't. I would hold off on trying to make things perfect, because it might actually be the enemy of good right now.
Yep. The good thing is though that like resetting that key is relatively low impact, right? The machine stays online. So yeah, I think there's considerations that should be made, but definitely once kind of the storm passes, so to speak.
I think everyone will be doing some sort of post-mortem as far as how they responded, what their gaps were, what could they have, because we could all sit back and say, okay, this is the combination of Microsoft and CrowdStrike. I'm guaranteed we could find other infrastructures that have the same combination. What if some telemetry tool is out there and it's interfacing with Cisco and Palo Alto, right? How many customers have that combination in their network, right? 2 market leaders again on the infrastructure. So, we once upon a time we had legions of products to choose from, and the market is consolidated down in every avenue to just a handful of players. So we all have the same combination in some format. So, we just need to start factoring in if we have a situation where we need hands-on, regardless what that impact is, whether it's pushing BitLocker keys to laptops or console cabling into a Cisco device to reset it because of some other third-party thing hosed it. I think that's a gap that maybe a lot of IR plans or continuity plans didn't account for.
Yep. Yeah, and I think BitLocker is one of those things that's very compliance driven. And it's one of those things that's debatable the effectiveness of, right? And the efficacy of. So maybe, this is compliance's fault for this whole thing.
Well, it's funny you mentioned compliance, because I just mentioned that Dave's Garage video channel out there on YouTube, Dave Plummer, the one he just released today, So he goes to explain why CrowdStrike needs the zero kernel level access.
Mm-hmm.
It says that this is such a vulnerability and Microsoft protects it so much. Why have they not created an architecture so devices can do things, or other products can do what they need to do without getting to the kernel? And Microsoft actually was on that path. They were going down that road to create a new interface so products could do just that. They were about ready to release it or getting close to it, and the European Union stepped in and they felt that was creating an unfair marketplace, and therefore Microsoft halted it.
Yep.
So to comply with European Union, they stopped the development of the tool set or architecture that might have potentially prohibited this. So
it's almost like Microsoft has experience with this whole monopoly thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's an Internet Explorer Netscape plug or reference for those who are not familiar.
Yeah. So this is one of those times where compliance is trying to do good, but did it actually stop further good? Or in a company like Microsoft, what do you do when you try? The difference between Microsoft and other systems is they always are focused on being backwards compatible. They're the only company out there that has to continually put stuff out there to make it backwards compatible for people. When Apple pushes out a new iPhone or new Mac, they're like, new chip, new processor, we don't care, so sad, goodbye. And people are like, okay, well, you're Apple, right? Microsoft has not got that luxury. I mean, that goes along with being the biggest vendor. But when they do try to make a change, it does seem like they do face more hurdles and it's a bigger boat to turn. So,
yeah.
Well, and real quick, I'll say too, I mean, I saw an article this morning and we were talking about it in one of our infrastructure meetings. But, going back to, this can happen to anybody, and it happens to Microsoft quite a bit as well. But there was an article this morning that was saying that part of the July Windows updates that got released, I think there's one or two updates in there that could cause computers to boot into the BitLocker screen after these updates get applied. So and that just came out this morning. So
I retweeted that with the caption "Deja vu." And, so. Yeah, imagine getting through the CrowdStrike event and then you run Windows updates and then you're back to the BitLocker screen again. That's a good way to give sysadmins nightmares and night sweats.
Well, then you're talking about the catch-22 compliance, right? If you say, you know what, I don't want to roll out patches for 60 days. I want stuff to hit the field and bake. I don't want to be bleeding edge or cutting edge. But then you have someone from compliance saying, well, we've got client agreements to say our systems will be updated within 30 days of release. Well, system uptime is just as critical as patching, right? And sometimes, the whole idea of a patch is make sure you have system uptime. So I know a lot of organizations have that challenge with compliance coming down saying, that you should be more aggressive in your patching. And over my years of incident response and running security networks and coaching cyber teams, I've taken a stance that patching is important, but it really can be at a much slower cadence than we're constantly being pressed on.
Yeah. And on the other side of the coin, like imagine a threat actor takes advantage of this novel TTP 3 days later and the patch didn't cause issues, right? But it was a slow rollout. I can imagine there being as much discord and up in arms about that too. It's like, oh, well, why did this organization get the update, but we didn't? We got breached because of it. So it's like that double-edged sword, but it's something that organizations, IT teams, sysadmins should be thinking about, right? Threat model it, tabletop it, like run these scenarios. Like what if there's this patch and it can prevent against this thing and we take our time to update it because we don't think it's a risk, but then it causes an issue, right? How do we respond to that? How do we treat that? How do we evaluate that?
And that's where we need to make sure that security, multiple security controls, multiple layers. When Log4j hit, a lot of people were stuck because they had all applications to be updated. Whereas if you were running CrowdStrike within hours immediately detected all the endpoints, gave you a report and said, here's who has it on the workstation. And you found out like, oh, we don't need this, uninstall it. And within hours, done. Like Log4j, while you're watching the world burn, it was Friday drinking beer. So that was a time where CrowdStrike absolutely nailed it. If you were in a situation where you couldn't fully patch or deploy, CrowdStrike already had the IOCs ready to go with Overwatch to block any attacks coming in. It just saw the executions and just said nope. So in that situation, your inability to patch because of what you need to do with your system upgrade cadence, you had your compensating controller on that. So you need to have more than just relying on just patches and just EDR.
For sure. Yeah. So I've got a couple more points, and then I got a couple discussion things real quick. So CrowdStrike, just this morning, they released, or I guess it was late last night, maybe early the night, they released this update to their remediation and guidance hub. And inside of that had some details, and it talked about how we plan to prevent this from happening again, or how CrowdStrike plans to prevent this from happening again. I'm not going to read through all of it, but there is a section where they talk about kind of the lessons learned, which I think is good.
Yep.
And I think it's something that CrowdStrike and other vendors can take to heart and kind of look at their own systems, their own processes to make sure that those are implemented. One of the things, though, I thought that was interesting that maybe they weren't doing already was more ring-based testing for these content updates. So much like the sensor, you can enroll in, N-1 or N-2, which means you're on the latest release -1. So
Yep.
the second to last release, or
You're 1 or 2 releases behind, or
exactly.
you can be bleeding edge if you want to be on the current release.
Exactly. So one of the things they said they're going to be working on is the same method, N-1, N-2, with these content updates.
Yep.
So hopefully, if something like this does happen again, there's an issue, a logic bug or whatever, it's on a much smaller segment of the customer base and not widespread. So that I thought was a really good change. And there was other stuff in there too. I don't know if you guys had anything else to comment on that, but that one I thought was a no-brainer.
I think the other big one to me too is the use of canary deployments. So that way they can start to deploy this to a smaller subset in the beginning, and hopefully catch this much sooner. So yeah, I think the canary stuff is good, and then like you said, given more granular control to customers. But I also think that kind of goes back to what we were just talking about, though. I think it's a double-edged sword, right? It's like,
Yep.
Now if customers choose to opt out of some of these instant updates, I mean, it's a risk-based decision that the organization has to make, as
Yep.
far as how far behind they stay, and it could put them at risk, of a newer technique or tactic. So
yeah, it definitely introduces a lot more strategy, I think, with
Yep.
how you implement your EDR product, whether it's CrowdStrike or anything else that uses that same model or that same method. I think there's a lot of strategy behind it, because some machines or some systems maybe you can put in bleeding edge and you want to test things and roll it out, and some things you want, like the CEO's computer, you probably don't want bleeding edge.
Yeah.
And that probably goes to a little bit of, in some regards, how good we've had it with some of these products over the years, that it has been kind of set it and forget it. You set it and it gets the updates, it keeps current. I started in IT 20 years ago. It was a thing to update Symantec, FTP to a server, download the data files, copy to a share, run a batch file. It was a thing. Or having to just do queue chains, update Windows products. Now Windows Update. And so some of these things we do set and forget it, but we don't really, like you said, we don't take time to really think. And this is going to definitely cause some organizations to go back and to start thinking about that. Oh, maybe we should, have one group in our early adopter program, everyone else haul back, and then, put some strategy around this. If obviously 0 day that's wrecking the world, that's where you break the glass and you jump ahead to the latest versions. But until those announcements, you maybe pull back. Either way, you have to have those conversations.
Yep. Yeah. And, another thing that came out this morning related to this is CrowdStrike is sending out $10 Uber Eats gift cards as an apology. Now, when I first saw this, I thought it was a complete joke, right? I was like, there's no way, right? They're sending out these gift cards, and supposedly, on the internet, people have been talking about this, and some of these cards don't work, and you can't redeem them, and it's kind of gotten to be a whole fiasco in of itself. And I feel like it's CrowdStrike kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Like they responded well. I thought they responded pretty quickly. They responded well. They got information out there. They got a fix relatively quickly. They're doing what they can, and then they sent out this gift card thing. It's just like it seems like it's not needed. Like it seems, or maybe too soon, or maybe just the wrong approach.
Yeah.
But if there's anything to criticize, I think that's lacked a little bit of tact and forethought to and what they really were trying to do with that.
I think it's the one, I've been using, like I said, I was a CrowdStrike customer since about 2018, pretty good sized deployment, very pleased with the product. Customer, tech people, the researchers, everyone, top to bottom, except, and I've been to Falcon, again, I've been through Circuit Trek. there just seems to be something, and this might just be personally, but the CEO, and I always take it a rep because he was the CTO of McAfee when they had their big disaster in 2010. But when you go out to CrowdStrike and you see all the stuff about F1 racing and sponsoring sports tournaments, and it's almost like he's proud of that. And it's like, dude, just do the block and tackling. Your company is doing great. Obviously, it wouldn't be doing as well as it is financially, Gartner's quadrant, et cetera, if it wasn't quality product. We'd rather have quality product with you just smiling and waving from the balcony than you touting all the pictures with the race cars and you in federal suits. Like, it just rubs everyone the wrong way. And then the card coming out now is kind of the let them eat cake, our bad, kind of pat them on the head. There's something tone deaf in marketing at the CrowdStrike, and that's just my perception. I haven't been around them for 5 years, 5-6 years now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I mean, I will say though, I feel like for me, I mean, I think they've been working tirelessly, ever since it happened, and I mean, they've been trying to be transparent, showing their accountability. I think that's why they've been trying to trickle out as much information as they can daily since this happened. So, we're still waiting on the root cause analysis. So I do hope, hopefully we can learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
And I think it's not all 100% on CrowdStrike. I think Microsoft, could possibly help, like we've been talking about, maybe they make some changes to how they handle this kind of integrations with the kernel. They move to a different method to do that.
Yep.
Because, I mean, again, I think Mac handles it a little bit differently. It didn't impact the Mac, obviously. So there's opportunities, I think, for both vendors to kind of help make this better going forward. But I have been impressed and happy with the way they've responded to it, at least from what we saw, having worked the event, or the issue.
Yeah, go ahead, Mark.
I say, and again, it's always has been sound product. And again, the people I've interfaced with, the people I've worked with, superb. And I said earlier that if I was the head of a security team and management was coming in saying, get this stuff off our network, I would be adamant, no. I still fully back the product. I still, feel very good about the product. It is, in my, there are other EDR products out there. To me, it's a quadrant leader for a reason. I still think even other products are good. There is just something right now where CrowdStrike has that arm's length. They're further ahead. So is this a black eye in the company? Absolutely. Is this something that we'll remember 10 years ago? Maybe. I barely remember the McAfee thing. So we'll see what time gives. I just think, my points earlier about marketing and perception, when guys are believers in the product and working in the trenches to undo a mistake, they don't want to be pat on the head and say, "Oh, go get them, kiddo." Like, we know, right? Yep. We know. We've had a sleepless weekend. We're still not out of it, especially if you're working for a company like Delta Airlines. They don't want that to be patronizing. They'd rather you just be, concise on your marketing or on your information, just saying, here's the status. And then when you're in, have a full 1 hour debrief webinar for the masses so everyone can hear the full postmortem, what happened and what they're doing forward and all that. To do something in the middle is just awkward footing and I'm not sure where that's coming from. Again, it's not coming from the technical side of the house.
Yep. Yeah, and there's no doubt that there should be accountability when these kinds of things happen. This is a major impact, a major global outage. I think, Mark, you said there was an article that quoted like $5.4 billion in impact in the Fortune 500 potentially. Yep. Something like that.
It just came out that rough estimates now are $5.4 billion in losses due to productivity, damage, restoration. And this hasn't factored in things like loss of customer, loss of, like Delta Airlines is taking a hit. They were kind of in the take the hit bucket to begin with, but this just added more weights in their pockets because they're being thrown overboard. So,
and I think merit goes a long way, and I think CrowdStrike is doing a good job, and I think I commend them for their efforts, and I commend the people over there that like you said, Joey, are working tirelessly. But on the same token, when bad things happen, there has to be accountability, and there should be investigations, and there should be some people that take ownership of that, of those mistakes, and learn from them, make sure they don't happen again.
Yep.
But on the same token, like, I don't think anybody out here, I think anybody kind of burning them at the stake is kind of doing them a disservice, right? You know, this could happen and has happened to many other vendors. It just so happens that CrowdStrike has the biggest market share and have the biggest footprint, right? So this is the biggest impact. But no doubt, this is a mega event. Like, this is wildly impactful. And there definitely should be accountability and recompense for those things when they happen. But I guess the saving grace for me is, at least right now, you know, this was not a cyber attack, quote unquote, right? This wasn't a widespread WannaCry or a ransomware event. Like, you know, an EDR system blew up a bunch of systems and it caused a bunch of downtime. But I think there is a silver lining to this whole thing.
Yeah, very true. And I mean, the systems were offline, so you know, you couldn't, I guess, you know, impact them from a cybersecurity perspective. Although there was we did see a little bit of a rise in, you know, some business email compromise. We detected some ourselves and stopped them. So I think, you know, threat actors did try to take advantage of this, you know, because they knew there was a distraction going on, and they could try to, you know, take advantage of it. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. We did an episode last week that just came out today on info stealers, and there's a Python-based info stealer going around that's abusing this or taking advantage of this event. So that's something we didn't really touch on, but yeah, BEC, social engineering, these info stealer, you know, spam campaigns are definitely going to be rich and ripe, especially now with this whole gift card thing. This is just a very ripe opportunity for cyber criminals right now, and something to be mindful of.
Yeah, and I think the other thing we were talking about was this a cyber attack? We saw quickly social media blow up with a lot of falsehoods, and CrowdStrike and Microsoft did really do a good job of getting out in front of that. When first people were pointing fingers at Microsoft put out a statement to kind of quell things, and then CrowdStrike stepped in. The two of them continually put information out. And we're seeing how quickly disinformation happens. And, you know, this is an election year. We have tensions are high, divisive in this country, et cetera. And we know people overseas are waiting for opportunities like this to make it seem like this is Armageddon, take to the streets, like this is it. And both companies did a good job, as well as getting factual information timely to the media to say, no, this is not. You know, I had family members call me like, "Hey, what do you think of this? Is this, you know, is this this it?" I was like, "No, no, this isn't the big one. This is, you know." But the point is, you know, I have elderly relatives who on social media, and they're reading like this is it, you know, and people are less informed. So, you know, as much as we were talking about the flat-footedness at front of CrowdStrike, now they seem to have the information well in front to totally squash any of that disinformation out there. And, you know, disinformation, you know, is just,
if I'm wearing my tinfoil hat, you know, so CrowdStrike had a Super Bowl ad, the last Super Bowl. Those Super Bowl ads are like $8 million. And then you talk about creative and like all the other things, like they're multi-million, tens of millions of dollars, right? Or like, you know, $10+ million, let's say, for the Super Bowl spot, like 1 30-second spot, right? My theory is, like, imagine the amount of marketing dollars and impact that they got and reach for this event. I mean, hey, tinfoil hat. I mean, that's not bad for marketing, for free marketing.
No, and you'll see their competitors have a quick bubble. I'm sure there were some deals taking place, comparing them to SentinelOne or somebody else. And the SentinelOne customers coming forward and saying, "Hey, glad you weren't on CrowdStrike. Let's you know, sign you." And so, but I think that'll be a small bump. CrowdStrike stock has already taken a small hit, but you know, they're going to be fine. The company's going to be fine. The point is, the joke is the fact that when systems are blue screen, they can't be ransomware, right? So perhaps there was a great destruction or disruption of the force, as you were, amongst the cyber criminals, and they all pivoted off. We saw that where, hey, these cyber criminals, you know, they've got quotas, and when they couldn't get to their CT infrastructure that was brought down because of updates, you know, they had to pivot off to something else. So
last minute thoughts, comments.
I'm looking forward to the lesson learned with the postmortem when finally comes out of this from CrowdStrike. again, I'm still a strong believer in the product, both defensive and investigative.
Yep.
I think there obviously was some egos bruised. My personal opinion is maybe rightfully so at management, but it seems like again, the people I've known, everything about this, they're pushing forward the right thing.
Yep.
This is a scale that is seen, but I think also might be waking up a lot of people who, again, things were overlooked because we did automate everything. I don't have a plan in case I need a bunch of resources, or when people things happen and things get overshadowed. That when we say this could be significant, we now have a taste of what significant can mean. That's you read that 600 computers are taken offline in Ukraine in order to disrupt heating in the middle of winter. Right? That doesn't seem so much. We say 8 million devices disrupted, and oh, by the way, we disrupted water treatment plants, energy plants, airlines, travel, car reservations, things a normal day of life, cash registers. Now all of a sudden we have a taste of, oh, okay, like this is the world we've chosen with technology, and there are some risks here, but we have some really smart people out there to address. And all things considered, I mean, it was a bad thing to happen, but the window of impact actually is very small. This thing did not go on as far as days and days of more and more devices getting affected. It was not like a pandemic, so it's spreading. It's like they pulled it immediately and kept it damaged. The big hammer hit, but I think there'll be some good things to pull out of this that will make a lot of companies a little more resilient, which is always aces in my book.
Yep. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think that, like we said before, I mean, I still stand by the product. I think they've done a lot of good, across the cybersecurity community. They've protected, a ton of organizations since they've been around, and I think they will continue to do so. There's other vendors that, put out, bad updates as well, and I think that this won't be the last time that we see something like this happen. I mean, hopefully it won't be to this scale. And hopefully some good will come from it, so that like Mark said, it's the right parties can make some good changes to prevent this from happening.
Yep. Yeah, I think CrowdStrike will ultimately take a hit financially, potentially as a result of this, whether they need to comp some licenses or kind of have some reparations and stuff like that. But I'm in the same boat. I think CrowdStrike will be just fine. There's great people over there, obviously. That's why their product is so good. And at the end of the day, this is a good training exercise, if nothing else, and something to learn from, and just another one of those scenarios to kind of gameplay or tabletop within your organization, kind of play out and kind of take this scenario and kind of adapt from it and kind of make up other scenarios that may seem wild and crazy, but just might happen one day. And I think this is a good learning lesson for everyone. So with that's our episode. I appreciate everybody listening. If you'd like to check out our other content, you can check us out on offsec.blog. We also have content and all the things that we do over at secureIT360.com. So you can check us out there. And of course, on social media, we're posting stuff all the time and posting content. So I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you. Oh, and thank you to Joey and Mark for jumping on the podcast today. Appreciate the dialogue and discussion and expert wisdom from you guys. And with that, we'll see you all.